So the name of this talk is It Takes a Village. If this isn't the talk, then you should probably leave now. No, I'm just kidding. The majority of people I know are actually here for it. So hi, my name is Salona Bonvald. I'm the executive director of IEEE SA Open. The website URL is saopen.ieee.org. You can find me on Twitter at Salona. Basically, if you Google Salona, you can find me. But I'm also on our Mattermost chat, which is a really good way to contact me and talk to me directly. So first of all, I wanted to go over, and most of y'all already know this, but what are some of the benefits of diversity? Well, the Harvard Business Review has been studying this for about 26 years. And they've got tons and tons of studies. And if you ping me on Twitter or something along those lines, I'll send you the links. But they talk a lot about the different benefits of diversity, and they're pretty well attributed at this point in regards to all of the different studies that they've done. So there's some pretty good numbers behind it. I think the biggest one is the better quality products. And you end up having more of a global perspective and the scalable perspective in regards to that because of the fact that you get such a diverse audience. The next thing is innovation. There's a lot more creativity and things of that come into play when you have more of a diverse set. There's also increased productivity. There's less biases, which is kind of probably one of the more obvious ones. There's clear communication, which can be a pain point at first, because sometimes when you're dealing with diversity, sometimes you have too much jargon, too much shorthand, you're assuming too many things. But at the same time, when you realize that you have to open up for that diversity, your communication will get a lot cleaner. And then also less tribal knowledge. Because of the fact that you end up having these clear communications, you get better long-term documentation, and that helps out a lot. And then also larger communities. When you fish in bigger ponds, there's more fish to be caught. So those are some of the basic benefits. And one philosophical thing that I would like everyone to ask themselves here at All Things Open: if it's not diverse, is it really open? So I feel like a lot of times when we're talking about a lot of these different things, we create these closed off silos, and we think of them as open because we've done all of these different things. But if you're not actually being inclusive, you're not really actually being open. So why is this talk about role diversity and not all of the other types of diversity? Well, there's a bunch of different reasons for that. And probably the biggest one is diversity is not equal to inclusion. A lot of times people go after that end metric being so many people of this nationality, so many people of this sexuality, so many people of this, so many people of that, da, 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 da. That's not what actually makes you diverse. What makes you diverse is inclusiveness. And one of the funny things that happens with role diversity is it ends up being a functional type of diversity, which, if done correctly, makes you more inclusive, because it helps with the managing of expectations. Expertise is more of a given. You get to focus on production readiness and things of that nature. And it's more about the benefits of playing a role in a community. And it ends up also being less political than identity politics or identity based diversity. The other reason that I really like role diversity too is, once again, too often we're sitting there going, okay, we need this one thing, and we go and we fish in a pond that's like a tank pond. I'm from Texas, you've got like 2 or 3 kinds of fish in there, and that's all you're going to get. And when you do that, that's all you're going to get. You're never going to be able to get, anything interesting or anything outside of the box when you just fish in a small pond. So if you look beyond developers and look into the other roles that happen, it's really important to do that, because that's where you get to having better production readiness, because businesses don't hire not just developers, right? Businesses, yes, we hire developers, but we also hire product managers, and we also hire architects, and we also hire designers, and we also hire all of those people for a reason. And that reason is getting to that production readiness and being able to have a product that customers want. So for the sustainability of open source, we really do need to look towards role diversity. So when you're going for diversity, I think one of the biggest things is understanding where they're at. Too often when people go for diversity, they want them to change to match their culture. And that will dilute all of your results in regards to the benefits of diversity. And once again, there's a Harvard Business Review study out there that talks about exactly this. You really have to go to where they are. And I don't just mean that physically, I mean that in regards to your vocabulary, how you do your tools. Maybe they're not used to GitLab. And then also understanding what it means in regards to the locations as to where they actually are. Sometimes that means other places where things are hosted or things of that nature, not just geo. Then the other thing that I'd like to talk about is the value of newbies. Way too often open source, we talk about newbies. Well, the reality is most of these people are not actually newbies. Okay, yes, recent college graduates, interns, that sort of things. Those are actual newbies. But for a lot of these other people, they're often subject matter experts in their own right. And that's why we do the role diversity aspect, because if you're a woman or a minority or something along those lines, meritocracy ends up being a complete and total myth, because you have to come in and challenge everyone, go through this whole, are you qualified? Are you not qualified? Rah, 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 rah. It's very confrontational and it doesn't make it inclusive. Instead, with role diversity, you're like, oh, hey, you're really good at marketing. Oh, you're really good at product management. Oh, you're doing this, you're doing that. And it brings in an atmosphere of respect for those people. And it makes it more inclusive than it was previously. One of the other things that happens with newbies is that they help a lot with tribal knowledge, because you'll have a lot of these people who are knowledgeable, but they might not be knowledgeable in the way that y'all are, or the different assumptions y'all are making. And so if you go in and have them come in, they can actually tell you where you're falling down in regards to your tribal knowledge pretty much immediately. And so they can actually help you fix any of the assumptions you have in your documentation. Often because of the fact that they have a role and they're speaking as an expert, it takes away that fear quotient, because they can ask questions without fear, because they know that their input on this diverse topic that maybe you don't know as much about is respected and valued. And then they can also focus a little bit more on quality and usability, because when you have a bunch of different diverse people getting together, they need to you have a common goal, and that common goal is usually whatever it is that you're working on be better, right? And so when you bring all that in, the newbies can actually tell you that, so that you don't have those assumptions that you normally have. And then also lastly, diverse processes, because other roles have different kinds of processes that they use to get their things done. And so once you bring some of those in, sometimes you can find holes that exist in your processes and you can adapt those to make them better. So what are we doing? Well, we're evolving the open source platform. And when we do that, we're talking about the tooling of it. And when we're creating them, we're making sure that everything's 100% open source. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a little bit. We also want the tool so that we can get the metrics off of it. I feel that one reason open source has been so biased towards developers is because of what we measure. What do we normally measure in an open source project? Code, lines of code, pull requests, comments, issues, things of that nature. We don't really go out beyond the box in regards to that. We need to be able to give all that love to all of those people who have existed for quite some time. There's a lot of communities that have a lot of people who tweet about them, throw events, do a lot of different work, help product management, all of those other different things, and they're all unsung. And we need to actually give them the credit that they deserve. And the reason for that was because of convenient data, right? We could get that off of Git and GitHub and such. So that's how we fell in kind of into a little bit of that hole, is because we had this clear accounting method. But be careful, convenient data is that, it's convenient. It's not necessarily right, and it's not necessarily going to tell you a lot. Be very transparent with everyone in regards to it. The tools need to be there so that we can sit there and see what it is exactly that they're doing. Things need to be findable. I think one thing that happens a lot with open source right now is things are scattered everywhere, and sometimes it's hard to figure out, well, where y'all were talking about this, where were you talking about that? Oh, we were talking about it over here. It's like, that doesn't help. Making sure that things are granular and traceable, so that way we can actually get to better data, and flexible, especially in regards to things like APIs and interoperability. And then lastly, and but not least importantly, respectful of rights. Some tools can accidentally exceed the rights that they're given in regards to that. And we all know what kind of trouble that can get you into. Earlier, Georg from Bitergio was talking about GDPR. And if you go and you gather too much of the data and you do too much different things, you can have some problems with rights and how you have to roll that back out in certain countries like Germany or Spain. So one of the things that we're looking at as a process for the platform that we're creating at IEEE SA Open is this progression where first we all get together and we talk about the different things and we document it. And then we create some templates. And so we're like, oh, okay, a really good way of doing this, we think, is, do an issue with this template. And then we look at it and we find that as those issues come in, we're like, oh, no, 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 no. And you can easily evolve that template without breaking a lot of things. And then we go to automation and then measurement and then validation and standardization. And so we're taking this slower progression to get to where it is that we need to be. But at the same time, we also believe that when we get there, we'll be getting to a more cohesive spot that gives everyone the things that they need. So one of the things in creating the rewards, too often people are focused on money and focused on a lot of these other different aspects. Instead, we're taking a focus in regards to things being healthy, accurate, and kind. So we don't violate people's privacy. We don't accidentally, reveal someone's identity who doesn't need for it to be revealed and can cause problems with their work or they're being stalked or anything along those lines, looking towards that. And then for doing the curation, the credit, we're leaning very heavily on the community itself to create and curate those so that they can be living things and they can evolve as they need to evolve. So if someone starts gaming it, the community can go, yo, not cool. And then they go, okay, let's go fix it. And so we can actually have that kind of ongoing thing, also doing things like safe identifiers, once again, not accidentally outing people, doing diverse badging. So when we talk about badging, we're not just talking about a certification or something along those lines. We're talking about badges for people, badges for groups, badges for projects, and breaking it down into much smaller aspects so that you can actually get the granularity that you need to know, first of all, what you've done. Secondly, to know what maybe you should do. And that conveys a lot more information to people when they're coming in and trying to participate with your project and where they can help you. And then also doing community peer recognition. So doing that again in that fun manner so that you can give like silly prizes and things of that nature so that it bonds the community together instead of, pitting them at each other. And then of course, doing rewarding those that do ongoing support and making sure that this all goes beyond the convenient data. So there's some other groups that are doing initiatives in role diversity right now. There's the CHAOSS group at the Linux Foundation. Several of them were speaking here. We go to their meetings, they come to our meetings. We do a lot of work together in regards to that. We're looking at right now doing Grimoire Labs. We haven't finished it yet, but we're looking at integrating that into the platform. So we're doing a lot of work in regards to that. There's also a really cool project coming out of Google and Vermont called Across with Ocean. And they're actually starting from the other end. CHAOSS is kind of working with the data that's there. And these guys are kind of going and saying, what is the data that we want and what are the behaviors that we want to drive forward? And so they had like 8 workshops ongoing where we actually went through the use cases of all of these different entities and doing it from a similar perspective of the badges where it was people, projects, groups, and that sort of nature. And then the UN with the UN and UNICEF and all of these other, global entities are working on some of that in regards to digital. They talk more about it being digital assets because they're going way beyond code. They're also talking about, the open data and the open hardware aspects of it. And so they're actually going through a bunch of their principles in regards to what needs to be open and how we need to measure that. So that we can have more role diversity because their focus is similar to IEEE's on humanitarian projects and how do we do technology for humanity's greater good. So one thing that we're doing at IEEE is we're eating our own cooking. So how are we doing this? Well, at the very beginning, what we're doing right now is we're laying a bunch of the groundwork. We're going very meta. And so we've got these advisory groups that I'll tell you about in a little while. And then we're doing a lot of collaborations. So we're constantly reaching out to other organizations to work with them on there. Brian Profit just arrived. We worked with Brian Profit in regards to Open Source Way and Red Hat and things of that nature. We got Stephen Jacobs in the audience with the Open RIT and helping it support academia better. We're constantly reaching out and working with other entities to get there. And we're kind of purposely going around to things like All Things Open and gathering all the subject matter experts in regards to open source and saying, hey, come here, participate with us. Let's create something better for open source. So we are community driven. What does that mean? Well, right now, this meta architecture that I told you about, first of all, we have OSCOM. Now, this is a IEEE committee that answers to the Board of Governors for standards, and they handle all of the rules and regulations and things of that nature for all of the standards that are existing on the platform. So we have 16 different standards who are using the platform in some fashion. And this is one way that we get this longevity. IEEE doesn't think in years, it thinks in decades. And so for our standards, we want to make sure that any of these assets that we create will be here for decades, not till next week, not till 5 years from now. It's much longer than that. And then we also have these 3 advisory groups. The community advisory group, which is actually led by Georg Link from Bitergia and Chaos, is, I think of it as the heart of the group. And this is where the nonprofits are. This is where the special interest groups are. This is where all of that exists. And then we have the marketing advisory group. And this is a little bit of a misnomer because it's way bigger than marketing. It's marketing and basically anything that's doing PR and getting the word out and events and things of that nature. And then lastly, we have the technical advisory group. And that's more about, it is what you're thinking of in regards to the technical steering committee, which I know that all of y'all are familiar with in open source, but it's more than that. It's also the product owners. It's architectural reviews. It's code reviews, best practices. It's bringing in the designers, things of that nature. So this is the basic architecture that we have right now. It's always growing. It's always changing. And so you can sit there and see that we have the community marketing and technical advisory groups, and then we also have the OSCOM. Under the OSCOM, we have several ad hoc committees, one that's determining the naming because of the fact that we're giving away free CI, CD, and pages on our platform. We do have to be careful about the name because it's basically your name dot opensource-IEEE.org. So no, senior poopy head, you can't do that. We're also doing a governance ad hoc, which is talking about all the different levels and types of governance. There are some types of governance that are already required for standards that are wanting to open source so that you don't have things like corporate dominance and you have a clear way for changes to be made and things of that nature, and it's balanced. And then we also have the ops manual ad hoc, which is the one that's going through and making the different changes that we need to stay in sync with the community on their different needs, because the ops manual is something that's part of the IEEE governing infrastructure for the Board of Governors. So it's a typical standardized process. And I'm about to go through each of the different 8 advisory groups, but you can sit there and see there's badging, there's diversity, equity, and inclusion, document and curation. This is where we're working with GitLab and Red Hat, and I'm forgetting someone right now on the community handbook templates, so that we're basically creating a bunch of different things in regards to a community handbook. So any open source project can come in and use it and can make copies of it and fill it in and then have a community handbook without having to write all that themselves. The education subgroup, which was at first academia, but then also involves K through 12. And then also the development models, which are helping with the best practices and how to actually run their organizations too. And then for the marketing, it's events, social media, metrics, OSINT, open source intelligence, how to do that ethically and kindly. And then with the technical AGs, we also have the security and data governance. And then we also have the feature and tools evaluation, which is where, the real meat of it in regards to the fact that different groups can come in and ask for features and ask for tools to be added to the platform. So if you go to GitLab and you sort on groups alphabetically, this is what you'll get. As you can tell, working with the interface is a little bit awkward occasionally. So we put numbers in front of all of the official style groups. So you have welcome, which is like where everybody comes in, and then you can sit there and see the advisory groups and some of the other different ones that we're doing. We're working on some processes here, as you can see, like with the archive project, so things can be archived. We're trying to do a lot to prevent abandonware and cruft in this. So it's not the same model as GitHub that you're probably used to. It's like, we want to make sure that everything that's on here and that's operating is doing it well and safely. So on the community advisory group, we have, as you saw, a lot of different ones, and they hold a lot of the culture in place. And so they do talk about, like, whenever any group is trying to set up different processes, they look at it and go, is this inclusive? Does this work for everyone? Are we being kind? Is this about facilitation and mentorship? Don't be dictatorial, things of that nature. And so we do a lot of work like that. And then we also do a lot of facilitation and mentorship and coaching for other different groups. So if they come in and they need help, they can do that. And then, like I said, by going through and recruiting a bunch of different nonprofits, this is something they're really good at, right? They may be new to open source, but they know how to do facilitation. And so they bring a lot in regards to that. And so you end up getting a lot of leaders in this group, a lot of people who have done a lot of different projects before. And so they're bringing in that type of knowledge. The next one is the marketing advisory group. And this group, I'm not going to lie, open source, you have not been nice to them. You really haven't been nice to them. It's interesting. There's several open source designers out there, and both of their sessions, one was on burnout and the other one was basically on how mad she was. And I can't blame them, because they have such a difficult time integrating and working often with open source that they get tired and they leave. And that's why I think often in open source, we're really good on developer to developer, right? We're really great with Apache. We're really great with Linux. We're really great with Kubernetes. We're really great with all of those things. But we need these people. We need these people, first of all, to let everybody know to come and join us and to work with us. And we also need them to understand more of what the users themselves need if we do want to break out into this world. And since we focus on humanitarian causes, we care a lot about what the users think. And so we're bringing that in and also figuring out how we can measure that and give credit where credit is due on the platform for them. One really simple one that they went and did on their own was an event calendar, where anyone can go in and propose an open source event. So they're like, okay, what's our approval process going to be? How are we going to go through and determine this? Da, 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 da. And they did it as a community so that they could have an event calendar and they could talk about the different events. And that became at least a way for everyone to highlight that type of work. And so they're doing similar things along those lines, like how do we share slides? How do we share? They created a social media toolkit. They are creating different, one guy is going to be working on how to talk to designers if you're a developer. So that, because the person kind of left and now is coming back. And I was like, well, this would be a great way to come back, is to sit there and say, oh, these are the good ways to talk to one another about that. And then artists as well. So then we have the technology advisory group, and this is probably what y'all are more used to seeing. And we are talking about things like best practices in creating a, now it flies out of my brain, the domain governance boards. Those governance boards. Sorry, technical steering committees. Technical steering committees. Most large open source projects have a technical steering committee. And so with this, you can actually, yes, we do best practices in that, but we also do on the platform itself, how do we make sure that we engage well with everyone else on the platform and add features and add tools and add all those different things. They're also working on a production readiness checklist so that we can get that ready for badging. They've got the security group. They're working with architectural and code reviews. At IEEE, we care a lot about peer review, but we can't do the normal publication model, right? You can't sit there and say, oh, we reviewed this, it's done. because that doesn't happen in open source. That doesn't happen for a lot of these different things. In fact, if you freeze them, that's dangerous, right? Because what do you do when there's a security portion? What do you do when any of those different things happen? You can't do that. So we're able to go in and talk about what that is and what those need to look back for us taking this forward. They also help a lot with the prioritization and logistics of that too. So for example, this is one of the processes that the TAG community did. And they also engaged with the community advisory group and the marketing advisory group on this. And so it's like, first they suggest a tool and they do that through issues and there's a template for it. And then they go through a checklist as to, is it open source? Is it this? Is it that? You know, and then they go through and then we notify the community that we're doing it. And we hear back from them. And then if that all goes well, then we do a proof of concept install, because not that open source projects would ever not tell the truth about what works and what doesn't. We still have to do the POC to make sure of that. And so they kind of like, we give all the volunteers temporary accounts and all that, so they can go, you know, beat it with a stick or throw rocks at it to sit there and see how it is. And so that's the whole community testing part. And then they do their approval and evaluation and feedback. And then we do an architectural review and pricing. And then we hand it off to IEEE. And then it has to go through yet another approval process because it's got to go through legal and security and all those other different pieces first. But that's a really nice open process that we've got going that they created themselves. So, and on the technical advisory group, that's that top group that's right there. And it's just an issue and you just put an issue in there. And then we go through the entire process over there on there. And so, and you can also see some of the other different groups that they're working on and works that they're doing there. Then we also have like the community advisory group, and there's stuff that can go across some of those different pieces. So for example, under the community advisory group, there's an education subgroup, which Stephen Jacobs is in. They went through and did with their students an entire evaluation of the platform. And then they came back and they went over to the technical advisory group on their features piece over here and said, hey, we need and want these things. You know, how do we do this? And so they're like, well, go and submit these issues here, do these things here. What do you think of this process? Okay, we like this, but we want this instead. Okay, great. You know, add this to the checklist, da, 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 da. And they did this whole evaluation where they went through that. And now we have a bunch of tools that we're doing proof of concepts with, such as next slide. Yes, Stephen. Right. So as Stephen said, just for the people at home, that it was a very diverse group, that it was both, it wasn't just programmers, it was also UX and UI, it was comms, it was, and I'm missing one that you said, PR and program management. Yeah. So all of those different ones came in to look at this and tell us what they thought. So earlier I said 100% open source. What does that mean? Well, yes, it means we're using open source tools. Okay, done. Most definitely, we're not going to compromise on that. That's just where we're at. We're using open source tools, but we're doing more than that. We're doing a lot more than that. One, we plan on upstreaming to all of those tools. So we've already engaged with GitLab CE, Mattermost, and Big Blue Button, and some of the other tools actually that haven't even gotten approved yet, to sit there and say, how do we upstream to you on this stuff? Because there might be some upstreaming we have to do on some of those tools before we can get them approved, right? So we do that. Okay, that's like good. Then downstreaming. So we've got several different projects happening. One, which is infrastructure as code, opening that up, but also there's another project for doing the single standalone servers as well for the developers and things of that nature. So, okay, that's our downstream. But then we're doing something that's going to be really hard, but it's also really exciting, which is cross stream. Because of the fact that we're open sourcing this platform all the way that we can, we are going out to other organizations that may be seen as competition or things of that nature. And instead saying, hey, we're doing this open source tool. Why don't you use it too? Here's the community process for getting changes in. Don't fork, just branch, bring it back in, and let's all create something better for society as a whole. And so that's what we're doing here, is we're going all the way around in regards to it. So making sure that it's as open as it can be. So our current tool set is Mattermost, GitLab CE, and Big Blue Button. These are a bunch of the tools that we're evaluating. Actually, Plant UML is live. We've got Plant UML on the platform, but we're working on Grimoire Labs, Socioboard for the marketing group, Evitye also for the marketing group. Nextcloud is the one that we're like really banging with sticks right now for the education group. Redmine for project management. Discourse was also brought up by the education group, and LibreOffice. We haven't quite decided on the Collabora LibreOffice Nextcloud combination because we are running into performance issues. And so we're trying to resolve those right now. And that's why we do the POCs, right? It's so that we can sit there and see if these things are actually going to work and work at scale for us on those pieces. So why is this so important? It's not really open if the community doesn't get to do what they need to do. The tools have to be changed to support our community, and the community has to have the freedom to change the tools. And that's a big piece that we're doing here with IEEE is, you know, what is our market? Well, it's a lot of engineers. Guess what? They don't just want source code. They want open hardware, they want open data, they want a lot of different stuff. That's not always the priority for certain commercial entities, right? They're busy doing this other thing. Well, we care about this more than they do. So if we can actually get in and start doing those things and integrating and finding all of the other different tools that we can work with on that, we're going to do it. And so we really need that customization and that ability to change. So our end goals are, you know, first of all, obviously being sustainable, because once again, decades, not years. We also care a lot about IEEE. I don't know how many times at the booth today I've gotten people going, oh, IEEE, they're pretty strict. Are you sure that they're gonna, well, that's wild that they're doing open source because they're really strict. And I'm like, well, if you think about it though, if you bring a, you know, if we like meet in the middle where, you know, we've got like this, the, as I like to say, the peanut butter of standards with the chocolate of open source, we can create the Reese's Buttercup that is our platform. But it is about doing that. And I think that can actually you know, if you notice our logo is, you know, raising the standards of open source. That's what we hope to achieve, make open source safer, make it more trustworthy, make it more mature, do all of those different things, because so many of the rules that we talk about that we have, it's like I have scars for each of them. It's like, oh, someone didn't get the IPR taken care of. Great, that's what killed that project. Oh, someone didn't take care of their trademarks, and now we've got this project dying. Oh, someone didn't take care of, you know, security, and now we've got this one dying. You know, all these different things are all things that I've suffered through at some point in time in my career. And so it's like, let's learn from all of those mistakes and others' mistakes as well to create a more safe and secure place for everyone. This way we also get, IEEE has 420,000 members worldwide, 160 countries. Guess what? We care about scale a lot because if we're going to bring in a lot of members, we need to be there. We also need to be accessible because once again, a bunch of different countries, a bunch of different types of people, all of those different aspects. And then also we're doing something a little bit different that may get some of y'all very excited, but fundable. So talking with a lot of different foundations, a lot of different organizations about what do they need to feel safe funding open source software, and what is it the things that they need to see in regards to that. And so working towards that, once again, long-term goal, not short-term. And then also short-term goal, safe. So we're doing a lot of things like security scanning, licensing scanning, all these different things on the side to make sure that things that are already on the platform are safe. We do not want to be SourceForge in 2005. You know, no nasty insertions. Thank you very much. You know, along those lines. And of course, you know, reusable. So where do we go next? There's a bunch of different things that are going to be happening next year, especially. We're going to be talking about best practices on open source governance and best practices on role diverse metrics. And then we're also evolving the platform itself to support diverse roles, open hardware, and open data. And so we're going to be gathering those groups together to talk about what else we can do to make the platform evolve more next year to do all of that. If you want to get started and you want to join us, first of all, saopen.ieee.org. Go to getting started, get an account. You can join the community and help create processes right now. If you want to just use a platform, you can. Just be aware, it's not the wild, wild west here. We do want some governance. We do want some different things. I had one of my friends who's like, oh, I'm going to bring my project over. And I'm just like, no, you're a little bit too much of the benevolent dictator. You're not going to like what we do here. You're probably going to stay on GitHub for a little while until you mature up and you want to collaborate more with other people. Then we'll figure it out. We're also doing the platform itself. So if you want to add features to the platform that also then get, sent up to the other projects, you can do that as well. Sharing your feedback, asking for other projects, donating or sponsoring workshops, videos, or features. And then consider, I talked about that cross-platform aspect. So if you have an open source program office, especially in academia or government, please, consider using our platform, because I think we'll have all the different things in place that will make your groups feel safer and more secure. So thank you.